Summary of Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People. Have you ever felt like you talk, explain, and strive, yet people just don't connect with you? As if there's an invisible pane of glass between your intention and their reaction. As if every conversation turns into a silent ego battle and no one is truly listening. You included? Well, that frustration is exactly where this summary steps in. The promise here is direct and practical. By applying the principles of this classic book, you will learn to build real connection, earn trust, and move people without forcing, manipulating, or selling yourself out. What's curious is that almost everything that works has less to do with logic and more to do with emotion and status. So take a deep breath, adjust your focus, and join us. And if this type of knowledge makes sense to you, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel, because that signals to the algorithm and to us that it's worth continuing to bring you high-value summaries like this one. We start by understanding that the first move to influence someone is to curb the impulse to point the finger. The story of pilot Bob Hoover illustrates this in an almost cinematic way. He was flying when both engines failed because the plane had been fueled with the wrong type of gas. He landed coolly, saved everyone, and found the young mechanic responsible for the error. Most of us would unleash our frustration, but Hoover chose a different path. He said he wanted that same mechanic to service his plane the very next day. It was a declaration of trust that educates far more than any reprimand. Why? Because criticism pricks pride, activates defense mechanisms, and humiliates. When someone feels attacked, they enter justification mode and don't learn. Behavioral. Science has long shown that positive reinforcement works better than punishment, and Dale Carnegie condensed this into a golden rule for living in peace and influencing people. If you need to correct someone, do it through trust, recognition, and example. Trade. You messed up for, I trust you, and I know you can do better. It sounds simple, but it changes the outcome. If you observe your week, you will see daily opportunities to apply this break on the impulse to criticize, the delayed service, the colleague who didn't deliver what you expected, the family member who repeated an annoying habit. In all these cases, the useful question is, what can I say that preserves their dignity and increases the chance of improvement? Because when you protect the other person's ego, you open the door to change. And when you attack, you close that door from the inside. The first principle is this: don't criticize, condemn, or complain. Swap venting for direction, impulse for strategy, and move forward. The second principle is a silent engine of performance. Give honest and sincere appreciation. This seems like a mere courtesy accessory, but it is a deep psychological need. There is an almost universal hunger to feel important, valued, and seen, and you can truly feed this need by noticing what most people ignore: the effort, the persistence, the quality of thought, the character. When a manager tells an employee that they see a sharp eye for detail and real potential, if they maintain focus, they are not just throwing confetti. They are lighting an internal lamp that changes attitude, energy, and results. Be careful not to confuse appreciation with flattery. Flattery is cheap sugar that sticks to the lips and quickly washes away. Everyone sees right through it. Appreciation is born from the heart and concrete observation. You don't just say, "You're amazing," into the wind. You say, "Your clarity in explaining complex data made the team's decision-making much easier, specific, true, and useful." This transforms environments, families, and teams because people begin to see themselves through a lens of competence and purpose. Notice how your day changes when someone recognizes something you did that required energy. Your posture straightens, your mind clears, and your desire to deliver more grows. This is the effect you can cause in others, and by doing so, you elevate the conversation, raise the climate of trust, and establish an emotional currency that pays dividends. And yes, some fear that praise weakens discipline, but experience shows the opposite. Well-placed praise increases responsibility. No one wants to disappoint someone who showed confidence and saw real value. So try it. Choose 3 people in your circle. Observe something concrete they did well, and verbalize it precisely. You will notice a change in their demeanor. You will notice engagement. You will notice that doors open where there was once friction, and you will feel that your influence has stopped being about demanding and started being about inspiring. This is the mature path to influence without resistance. The third principle seems like a simple metaphor, yet it defines the backbone of persuasion. Arouse in the other person an eager want. Think like the fish, not the fisherman. Most of us talk about what we want, what we need, what we plan, and we expect others to buy into our agenda. The result is predictable: disinterest. That's because every person's head is full of their own goals and fears. The shift happens when you start structuring proposals from the other person's universe. What they value, what they fear losing, what they want to gain, and how your idea, product, or suggestion shortens their route to what matters. When you change the conversation's lens from "I need you to do this" to "this helps you achieve that," you reduce friction, disarm skepticism, and create traction. It is impressive how resistance drops when someone feels heard and understood. And here enters a critical skill that everyone claims to have, but almost no one actually practices: active listening. This means asking questions that reveal their mental map, letting the person speak, reflecting on what you heard, and only then aligning your proposal with what they already desire. If you are selling, start by validating what the person is trying to solve. If you are leading, connect the task to the employee's identity and growth. If you want to convince a friend, show how the proposed path preserves the values they respect. You might have the exact same content, but by changing the mental packaging, you change the acceptance. It's not a trick, it's strategic empathy. And when the other person realizes your idea is laying a concrete brick in their dream, no's turn into maybes, and maybes turn into yeses. Therefore, before speaking, ask. Before asking, discover. Before demanding, align. This small discipline makes your speech move out of the vocal cords and into the limbic system, where decisions truly happen. And when you feel this difference, you understand why this book remains relevant. It doesn't teach canned phrases. It teaches principles that map what is profoundly human: the desire for importance, the preservation of ego, the pursuit of progress, and that never goes out of style. Notice how the first three principles dance together in a coherent choreography. First, you remove the barrier of criticism, protecting the other's pride and keeping the bridge open. Then, you inject sincere appreciation, feeding the need for importance that everyone carries. Then, you accurately aim your discourse, speaking from the other person's world, their interests, and their goals. It is in this scenario that your message stops sounding like an instruction and starts sounding like an opportunity. When this happens, the relationship changes fundamentally. Trust emerges, spontaneous cooperation arises, and a climate of "we're on the same side" takes root. Curiously, that is when you are most influential. Not because you imposed, but because you harmonized. To consolidate this learning, try imagining a difficult conversation you need to have this week. Someone you tend to correct, a request you need to make, a refusal you need to navigate. Write an opening sentence that respects their ego and avoids criticism. Write an honest acknowledgement of something the person truly does well. And finally, describe the request in terms of their benefit. The more specific, the better. This triad, without empty rhetoric, changes the atmosphere and unlocks decisions. And if this roadmap is helping you clarify your paths, hit the like button and subscribe. Because in addition to this summary, we have a sequence of works that delve into communication, leadership, and social skills, all translated into practical action and fluid narration for you to listen to as you live your day. Now hold this mental image for when the temptation to point out errors arises. Imagine that every person you meet carries an invisible sign asking, "Make me feel important." Use this as a compass to modulate your words, your expression, and your proposal. Strengthen your reputation as someone who doesn't humiliate, who recognizes, and who aligns interests. You will notice doors opening where there were once impasses. You will realize that others begin to seek you out when they need to decide. because you have become synonymous with psychological safety coupled with direction. And that is the kind of influence that lasts. Influence by respect, not fear. By admiration, not pressure. When you notice this effect, you will want to take it to the next layer of the book, where we learn how to be more magnetic and memorable without theatrical effort. Simply by aligning attitude, genuine curiosity, and small signals of importance that spark sincere smiles and create worthwhile bonds. From this point, the book enters a more subtle and fascinating dimension. The art of getting people to like you. There is no manipulation here. There is practical psychology, because liking someone is an emotional reaction, not a logical one. No one rationally decides to like someone. The feeling arises when certain emotional needs are met. This is what Carnegie deciphers through the following 6 principles, starting with something that seems simple, but is revolutionary when done authentically. Become genuinely interested in other people. That word, genuinely, changes everything. Because feigning interest is negative transparency, the other person notices. The human body is a social reading machine. The gaze, the tone of voice, the posture all give away calculation. But when the interest is real, when you truly care, the energy shifts. People feel it, open up and trust. This is what differentiates the common communicator from the magnetic one. If you doubt it, think of someone who listened to you with total presence. No checking the phone, no interrupting, just absorbing and reflecting what you were saying. Remember that feeling. It's one of worth, of importance. And this is what you can evoke in people by cultivating sincere curiosity. Noting names. Remembering details, praising precisely, sending a message that says, "I thought of you when I read this." This simple gesture is worth more than any elaborate speech. The book shows that this posture will make you stand out more in 2 months than years spent trying to impress others with results. Influence is born from interest, and interest is born from the gaze that sees the other person as a person, not a function. The second principle is the most underestimated on the list, and perhaps the most powerful. Smile. Because the smile is a universal message that communicates acceptance, security, and warmth even before a single word is spoken, modern science has confirmed what Carnegie already knew intuitively. Smiling is not just an expression. It is a trigger for emotional mirroring. When someone smiles genuinely at you, your brain activates mirror neurons that produce the same internal state. It's chemistry, dopamine, oxytocin, and this effect changes the tone of the entire interaction. There is a story in the book about a grumpy stockbroker who decided to test the power of smiling more. He realized that clients and colleagues began reacting more easily and collaboratively, negotiations flowed, and even his income increased. It's simple to understand why. A smile conveys the message, "I enjoy being here with you." And who doesn't like to feel that? But there is a crucial detail. Don't force it. The smile must come from intention, from the willingness to be present, and not from a calculation to please. The human face recognizes falsehood in milliseconds, so the key is to align thought and expression. Smile because you genuinely want to connect. When this becomes a habit, your presence transforms, the environment changes, and the probability of collaboration grows exponentially. The third principle states that a person's name is to that person the sweetest and most important sound in any language. It seems small, but it has a profound impact. The name is identity. It is an emotional anchor. It is the first word we learn to associate with who we are. When someone remembers, pronounces correctly, and uses our name naturally, we feel recognized and valued. It is as if they are saying, "You are not anonymous." And the opposite is also true. Forgetting or mispronouncing a name communicates inattention, distance, and even slight disrespect. And this is devastating in human and professional relationships. The politician James Farley became a legend by remembering the names of thousands of people, not because he had an extraordinary memory, but because he cared enough to write them down, repeat them, and review them. This gesture created a network of loyalty that led him to the top. In practice, the principle teaches that if you want to create connection, memorize names, repeat them in conversation, use them with respect, and you will notice that the initial barrier of formality dissolves. The other person relaxes, and the conversation becomes more human, closer, and more influential. The fourth principle is the art of truly listening, and here lies perhaps the biggest gap of the modern century. Everyone wants to be heard. Almost no one wants to listen. But those who learn to listen gain instant social power. Carnegie tells the story of a dinner where he barely spoke and was called the best conversationalist of the evening, because most people confuse conversation with taking turns having monologues. What people are truly seeking is full attention. And listening is not just being quiet while waiting for your turn to speak. It is showing, through body language and micro-reactions, that you are absorbed in the other person's story. It is asking questions that demonstrate you have grasped nuances. It is reflecting the feeling, not just the content. This active listening is so rare that when someone offers it, the other person latches on, trusts, and opens up. And curiously, this makes you a more interesting person, because humans associate interest with value, and they begin to crave your company. In practice, listening is giving space. It is allowing the other person to recognize themselves out loud. And when that happens, you become a mirror. It is impossible not to like someone who makes us feel understood. The fifth principle expands this same logic. Talk in terms of the other person's interests. This is because each of us lives an internal narrative where we are the protagonist, and anything that doesn't connect with that narrative sounds irrelevant. If you want someone's attention, enter their movie, discover the theme that moves them, and build the dialogue in that territory. This is what Theodore Roosevelt called the royal road to a man's heart. Carnegie shows how this applies in any context, personal or professional. By discovering what motivates the other person and starting there, you create rapport, trust, and willingness. The case of the executive who financed a scout trip after talking at length about a valuable painting is a perfect example. Before asking for something, warm the other person's mind by talking about what they love, because interest precedes openness, and without openness, there is no persuasion. This principle is a compass that works for sales, negotiations, and even family relationships. Stop trying to convince based on your motive. Find the other person's motive and align your argument with it, and you will see that the yes arrives naturally. The sixth and final principle in this section closes the golden circle of human appeal. Make the other person feel important, and do it sincerely. Sincerity is the key word again. Feigning it destroys the effect. Being genuine transforms. People are not looking for compliments. They are looking for real recognition. The scarcity of this gesture is so great that when someone offers it with truth, the bond is immediate. Look around you. The tired server, the hurried delivery person, the colleague who does more than is asked. Everyone has something that can be recognized. A quality, a patience, an ethic, a care. When you verbalize this without ulterior motives, you don't just brighten the person's day. You reaffirm their humanity. And this returns in the form of respect and goodwill. Carnegie said that if we are so selfish as not to scatter a little gratuitous happiness, we deserve the emptiness that follows. That's exactly it. The secret to being liked is simple. Look, notice, value, and express without expecting a return. Because the return comes in another way. In the energy of the environments you touch, in the doors that open, and in the feeling that the world reacts better to you. When these 6 principles unite, the effect is exponential. You stop being just someone who speaks well, and become someone who makes others feel good. And that is the most enduring form of influence. Humans forget words, but they never forget the feeling of having been respected, heard, and valued. If this summary is helping you reflect on how you connect and communicate, hit the like button and subscribe, because the next part reveals how to turn this ability into persuasive power, leading you to influence opinions, decisions, and results without conflict, merely through a deep understanding of human nature. We have arrived at the section where Dale Carnegie teaches us the subtle art of influencing and convincing without forcing. This is where conversation stops being a simple dialogue and transforms into direction. It is where you learn to win hearts and minds without needing to win arguments. And this is the first and most important principle of this section. The only way to get the best of an argument is to avoid it. Although it sounds paradoxical, it is pure practical wisdom, because when you argue, even if you win, the other person leaves wounded, and the wounded human ego closes doors. No one changes their mind when humiliated. Every direct argument activates defense and pride, and even if the person rationally accepts it, emotionally they reject it. So the antidote is to avoid the duel. It is to transform confrontation into conversation. Carnegie shows that the true victory is preserving the relationship and opening space for reflection. This starts by controlling your emotion, maintaining a calm and welcoming tone even when disagreement provokes anger. Listen first, seek points of agreement, and postpone decisions. This is emotional maturity applied to influence, because you don't want to be right, you want to be effective. And effectiveness is achieved through empathy, not volume. The second principle reinforces the same line. Show respect for the other person's opinions. Never say, "You're wrong." This seems like a minor point of etiquette, but it is a powerful weapon against emotional blockage. Because the instant you say, "You're wrong," is the instant the other person's mind shuts down, and the dialogue dies. Instead, use the humility of doubt. Phrases like, "I may be mistaken, but it seems to me that," or "Let's look at the facts together." This changes the atmosphere. The other person doesn't feel attacked and begins to cooperate in the search for truth. This is the psychology of openness. When you respect the other person's pride, they feel safe to adjust their own position, and influence sets in without resistance. This is how high-level leaders, negotiators, and communicators build consensus, not by imposing, but by guiding with respect and active listening. The third principle is almost an emotional trick. If you are wrong, admit it quickly and emphatically. Because most people spend so much time defending themselves that they forget the power of disarming with sincerity. When you acknowledge a mistake before the other person points it out, you remove their need to attack, and the atmosphere changes. Instead of accusation, empathy arises. Carnegie recounts that when he spontaneously admitted a failure to a police officer, he received kindness instead of punishment, and this pattern repeats. Admitting a mistake doesn't diminish you. It magnifies you because it reveals self-confidence and integrity, and the other person feels safe by your side. It is one of the fastest ways to turn conflict into collaboration. The fourth principle is the natural continuation. Begin in a friendly way. This seems simple but requires emotional discipline. Because in moments of disagreement, the instinct is to harden the tone and raise walls. But what truly changes hearts is kindness. Carnegie uses the fable of the wind and the sun. The wind tried to rip the man's coat off by blowing hard, but the sun merely warmed him, and the man removed it voluntarily. It is the perfect metaphor for persuasion. When you warm the other person with cordiality, they open up, and when you pressure them, they shut down. The lesson is clear. Start with human warmth, a smile, listening, and empathy, and what seemed like an obstacle turns into fertile ground for agreement. The fifth principle is strategic. Get the other person saying, "Yes, yes," immediately. This is because the first "no" creates resistance and justification, but a sequence of yeses creates alignment and a rhythm of agreement. It is a psychological phenomenon studied even today. When someone starts saying yes, the brain begins to seek coherence and tends to continue that pattern. So instead of starting a conversation with disagreement, begin with questions and statements that the other person already believes. For example, you want to improve your results, right? You agree that small daily changes lead to big impacts? And as they answer yes, your proposal naturally fits into the flow of approval. It is elegant, effective, and transforms resistance into collaboration. The sixth principle is almost an inversion of power. Let the other person do a great deal of the talking. Because those who speak less hear more and better understand what truly motivates the other party. And those who speak too much lose the emotional map of the conversation. Carnegie said that most people do not listen with the intent to understand, but to reply. And that is the root of conflict. The secret is to reverse the focus. Let the other person express their viewpoint, their complaints, their reasons, and only then propose something. When the person feels heard, resentment dissolves and receptivity emerges. It is a principle that transforms difficult conversations into bridges, and intelligent leaders use it to discover solutions that the ego would never allow them to see. The seventh principle completes the listening triad. Let the other person feel that the idea is his or hers. Here is the turning point of any negotiation. Because people rarely resist their own ideas, but they resist imposed ideas. If you guide someone to a conclusion with well-structured questions and let them formulate the result, they become a defender of it. This is the psychology of authorship. It is what differentiates command from conviction. Therefore, instead of imposing solutions, guide with curiosity. Encourage the other person to suggest. And when they arrive at the conclusion you already had in mind, the credit will be theirs, and the execution will happen with enthusiasm. The 8th principle deepens empathy. Try honestly to see things from the other person's point of view. This requires training, because our mind tends to interpret everything through its own filter. But influence is born precisely from the ability to step out of oneself and into the perspective of another. Ask, what leads them to think that way? How would I react if I were in their shoes? This simple shift dissolves judgments and opens the way for agreements that previously seemed impossible, because the other person feels understood, and no one resists for long someone who genuinely understands them. The 9th principle is the direct sibling of the 8th. Be sympathetic with the other person's ideas and desires. Phrases like, "I understand how you feel," have therapeutic power, because they validate the emotion before attempting to change it, and validation is the key to disarming. When someone is irritated and you say, "I understand your frustration," the defense system relaxes, and the conversation returns to the rational field. This is empathy applied to leadership and influence. The 10th principle is to elevate the discourse. Appeal to the nobler motives. This is one of the book's finest techniques, because when you speak to people's moral vanity, to the image they have of themselves, you awaken the desire to act in accordance with that identity. If you want someone to act correctly, associate the action with the quality they admire in themselves. I know you are a fair person, and that is why I bring up this point. It is an elegant and ethical way to inspire positive behavior. The 11th principle is theatrical and essential. Dramatize your ideas. Cold facts rarely convince. Emotion convinces, mental images stick. Carnegie tells the story of a newspaper that responded to critics by transforming numbers into a visual spectacle and silencing detractors with creativity. The lesson is clear. If you want to be remembered, turn concepts into scenes, numbers into stories, and ideas into images, because the human mind thinks in narratives and retains emotions, not statistics. And the 12th principle closes the cycle of active influence. Throw down a challenge. Because the human spirit is driven by overcoming obstacles, when you turn a task into a challenge, you spark pride, curiosity, and competitive energy. Effective leaders use this trigger masterfully, appealing not to fear, but to positive ambition. And this lights the internal fire of achievement. People give more of themselves when there is a game, when there is a goal that makes them feel growth. These 12 principles form the backbone of positive influence, where every word is chosen not to dominate, but to understand. Every gesture is planned not to win, but to connect. By practicing them, you stop being a common communicator and become a catalyst for change. Someone people listen to, trust, and follow. And if this summary is expanding your way of viewing human relationships, hit the like button and subscribe, because the next part concludes the journey by showing how to lead and correct without giving offense, how to shape behaviors while preserving dignity, self-esteem, and mutual respect, the pinnacle of Dale Carnegie's method, leadership that transforms without wounding.